Welcome to today's Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're tuning in today because we're unpacking a fascinating and frankly a really common medical mystery. If you've ever looked down at your feet and ankles in the evening and noticed they look, well, a little puffy, or maybe your shoes suddenly feel super tight and heavy, you're definitely not alone. Today, we're going to completely demystify exactly why our feet and ankles swell up like balloons at the end of the day. And more importantly, we're going to look at exactly what the science says about how to fix it, right down at the cellular level. It's the perfect question to really kick us off, right? Why do your socks leave a dent at the end of the day? It's something so universally relatable. You sit down, you peel your socks off before bed, and boom, there it is. This deep, stubborn indentation wrapped right around your lower leg. For a lot of folks, it's just this frustrating daily annoyance that gets brushed off as, a normal part of getting older or just working hard. But today, we're going to uncover the hidden cellular culprit behind this daily occurrence. Because spoiler alert, it is not just about gravity, and it is definitely not just about being on your feet all day. Okay, let's dive into this. When you take your thumb or your finger and press it firmly into the lower part of your leg, and it leaves a physical dent that actually takes a few moments to fill back in, that is a real clinical condition. It's called pitting edema. And by giving it its proper medical name, we're shifting our investigation here. We're moving from just a random annoying symptom to a true physiological mystery. We have to ask, what is actually happening underneath the skin to cause all that fluid to pool down there and just stubbornly stay put? To solve any good mystery, we first have to look at the usual suspects. When you look into edema, you'll almost always see these specific causes listed. For instance, your liver makes certain proteins that literally help hold the blood inside your arteries. So if the liver is damaged, those proteins drop, and fluid can actually ooze right out of your circulation and into your tissues. Kidney damage can cause a very similar kind of protein loss. Then there's venous insufficiency, which is basically a mechanical problem with the veins trying to return blood up to your heart, causing a pooling effect. But then, there's this commonly blamed idea that fluid retention simply comes from standing or sitting too much. Let's just debunk that one right now. Think about it. Some people stand for 10 hours at work and never get edema. Others sit at a computer all day long and their ankles are perfectly fine. If gravity and posture were the primary root causes, literally everyone would swell equally. But they don't. Section 1. The medical mystery. Unmasking the metabolic sponge. Since we're ruling out simple gravity, we've got to shift our focus away from just the veins and those usual suspects. We need to look much deeper into the body's chemistry to find the true hidden culprit. And here is our real culprit, the metabolic sponge. This is such a powerful concept to grasp. When you eat a diet that's high in carbohydrates and sugars, your body instantly triggers the release of insulin. But when you have way too much insulin constantly building up in your blood supply, it actually alters how your kidneys function. Your body suddenly goes into panic mode and starts to aggressively retain sodium. And as you probably know from eating a really salty meal, anytime your body holds onto sodium, you are absolutely going to retain fluid. Your entire internal environment starts acting exactly like a sponge, just stubbornly holding onto water. The math on this is honestly shocking. For every single unit of carbohydrate you consume, your body holds onto 3 units of water, a 1-to-3 ratio. So a high-carbohydrate diet literally turns your body into a giant walking metabolic sponge. And naturally, because of gravity, a huge amount of that heavy, trapped fluid inevitably makes its way down to show up in your feet and ankles. That sock indentation you see at night, yeah, that is purely this exact metabolic situation manifesting right in front of your eyes in real time. And this brilliantly illustrates the massive disconnect in how this condition is usually handled. When a patient goes into the doctor's office with swollen ankles, they're very often told they have venous insufficiency. And the standard response? They're put on a diuretic pill to aggressively force the fluid out, and they're told to immediately go on a strict low-salt diet. But in reality, both of those interventions are completely missing the mark. They're just treating the symptom. They're acting as a temporary band-aid. A low-salt diet does absolutely nothing to correct the chronically high insulin, the excessive carbohydrates, or the fact that your metabolic sponge is still actively trying to absorb every drop of water it can. Now, you might also hear advice to just exercise more, go for a walk or do calf raises. And to be totally clear, that is fantastic advice for your general circulation. Your calf muscles are incredible. When you activate them, they literally act as a second heart, squeezing your leg veins to help push that blood back up against gravity. But listen, if that metabolic sponge is not handled first, you are simply not going to see lasting results from extra walking. And the minute you stop taking those prescribed diuretic pills, the swelling is going to come rushing right back because the underlying insulin issue was never actually resolved. Which brings us to Section 2, the potassium deficit. Because it's not just about what you're consuming way too much of, like carbs and insulin, it is also about a severe, widespread lack of a completely vital mineral. Now, what's really interesting about this is this staggering number right here. 4,700. Our bodies require a very specific, delicate ratio of sodium to potassium, and we actually need a whole lot more potassium than we do sodium. The daily requirement for potassium is a massive 4,700 milligrams, yet the average person eating a standard modern diet, they don't even come close to getting half of that amount. We are basically walking around with a massive chronic potassium deficit every single day. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, oh, no problem, I'll just run down to the health food store and grab a potassium supplements. Well, hold on a second. By law, standard over-the-counter potassium pills are limited to just 99 milligrams. If your daily goal is 4,700 milligrams, how many of those tiny 99 milligram pills do you think you'd have to swallow? You'd have to take almost half the bottle every single day just to meet your basic baseline needs. It perfectly illustrates the absurdity of the situation. A tiny store-bought pill is simply not going to fix a massive dietary deficit. And here is where the standard medical treatment actually makes the root cause so much worse. Remember those diuretic pills we talked about? The ones prescribed to push the fluid out of your swollen ankles? Well, they actively deplete your body's potassium levels even further. It's this incredibly frustrating vicious cycle. Even doctors recognize this and will sometimes prescribe potassium pills alongside the diuretic. But as we just covered, you need vastly more potassium than what is typically provided in pill form to actually fix the underlying issue. So why is this mineral so incredibly vital for our ankles in the first place? It all comes down to this absolute biological marvel, the sodium-potassium pump. This is a microscopic pump built into the membrane of every single cell in your entire body. Its primary job is to maintain fluid balance and actively push excess fluid out of your tissues. But here is the major catch. This pump absolutely cannot function without sufficient potassium, period. When you're severely depleted, the pump essentially breaks down. It stops working, so the fluid has no way to be pumped out, and it stays permanently trapped in your lower extremities. Let's move to and see how this builds right into Section 3, fixing the root cause. We've successfully identified the metabolic sponge, which is the high insulin from carbs, and we've found the broken cellular pump, which is the low potassium. Now let's look at exactly how we can reverse engineer this whole process to finally get some real relief. So the crucial point is this highly effective three-pronged approach. Step 1, adopt a low-carb or ketogenic diet. By getting rid of the excess sugars and heavy carbs, you instantly lower your insulin, which totally stops the kidneys from aggressively hoarding sodium. Step 2, intermittent fasting. By simply decreasing how often you eat, you give your insulin levels a chance to rest and drop even further. And step 3, dramatically increase your potassium intake through whole foods in your diet. This extra potassium balances out the sodium, makes your cells way more sensitive to insulin, and most importantly, it turns that sodium-potassium pump back on so your body can finally actively push that excess fluid out. When you combine these 3 steps, the results are nothing short of incredible. Because the fluid is no longer locked in by high insulin and your cellular pumps are finally firing again, a person transitioning to this lifestyle will typically lose between 7 and 11 pounds of pure, trapped fluid in just the first 1 to 2 weeks. Think about that. That is the metabolic sponge completely deflating. It really forces us to look entirely differently at how our bodies actually operate, doesn't it? The very next time you take your socks off and see that stubborn dent right there in your ankle, I want you to ask yourself a question. Are you just going to keep treating this symptom with temporary band-aids? Or are you finally ready to give your cells the potassium they desperately need, lower that insulin, and deflate the metabolic sponge for good? The choice is entirely in your hands, and, quite literally, on your plate. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this empowered you with some incredible cellular knowledge today.